My name is Khalid al-Hassan, and for 29 years I lived as a ghost inside my own skin, a man molded by fear, duty, and expectations so heavy that I forgot what my own thoughts sounded like. I was born in Riyadh, raised under the strict eyes of a father whose voice carried the weight of a military general, and a mother who spoke mostly through sighs and silence. From the moment I could walk, Islam was not just a religion, it was the air I breathed, the law I obeyed, the cage I learned to decorate so it would look like home. I memorized the Quran before I even understood why. I prayed because I was told the world collapsed for those who didn't. Fear was my first teacher, discipline my second, and emotional numbness my constant companion. They always said obedience brings peace. Yet all I ever found was a quiet emptiness that grew with me like a shadow. I learned early that questions were dangerous and curiosity was rebellion, so I buried every doubt deep inside me and wore piety like armor. By my teenage years, I had become exactly what my father wanted: rigid, unbending, serious, a young man praised for his devotion. Inside, I was hollow. But I discovered something intoxicating when I joined a group of Islamic activists in my early 20s. They gave me what my family never gave: praise. They said I had zeal, that my fire was proof of strength, that I would be a defender of Islam. For the first time, I felt seen, not for who I was, but for who they wanted me to be. I clung to that validation like a man drowning. And so, when they told me to burn Bibles to show my loyalty, I did. Not because I hated Christians, not because I understood theology, but because fire made me feel powerful in ways prayer never did. Burning something others cherished became an outlet for the rage I never admitted I had, the confusion I never voiced, the silence that was suffocating me. Every time I dropped a Bible into the flames, the men around me cheered, my leaders nodded with pride, and I felt, if only for a moment, like I was enough. It was a lie, but it was the only comfort I had. Yet beneath all that outward zeal, my heart remained restless. I prayed 5 times a day, but Allah felt distant. I fasted, but nothing in me changed. I recited verses, but they didn't touch me. I followed every rule, yet I still felt unclean. And when I dared whisper to myself that something was missing, I crushed the thought immediately, terrified of my own mind. If you're watching this, I want to pause for a moment and gently ask you to subscribe, like, comment, and share this testimony. Not for fame and not for me, but because there are thousands living in fear, like I was, afraid to question, afraid to breathe, afraid to imagine a different life. Your engagement helps this reach the ones hiding behind screens in the dark, praying silently for answers. Now, let me take you to the night everything began to break. It was a crowded rally in the old district of Riyadh, drums echoing against walls, chants rising like smoke into the night sky. I had done this so many times before, but something in the air felt different. Maybe it was the heat, or the heaviness in my chest, or the strange tension I couldn't name. The Imam handed me a Bible and told me to show the crowd my devotion. I opened it casually, ready to toss it into the fire, but a single verse caught my eye. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. The words hit me like a blow to the stomach. Forgive them? Forgive who? Forgive me? I had never heard God described with such tenderness. Islam taught me fear, distance, obedience. These words carried warmth, unnerving, unfamiliar warmth. My hand shook. My throat tightened. I felt exposed, as if someone was watching me, seeing through the anger I wore like armor. I threw the Bible into the fire just to silence the feeling, but what happened next shook me. The pages curled and blackened, but that verse, those exact words, refused to burn. It glowed softly in the flames, not shining, not supernatural, but enough to hold my eyes captive. enough to fracture something inside me. The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed. The Imam smiled. And I felt my world tilt. That night I lay in bed replaying the moment, the verse burning behind my eyelids. I told myself it meant nothing, but my heart wouldn't listen. I closed my eyes, trying to escape the feeling, when suddenly, in the darkness, I heard a voice whisper my name. Khalid. A voice warm, deep, gentle. A voice that felt like it knew me. I jolted awake, sweating, shaking, terrified. I told myself it was a dream. I told myself it was a jinn. I told myself to forget it. But the voice returned, and with it, the life I knew began to crack. My first crack in faith came on the night I burned a Bible. The night after the Bible refused to burn, something inside me would not rest, as if a door had been cracked open somewhere deep inside my chest, exposing a part of my soul I had spent my whole life suffocating. I tried to convince myself it meant nothing, that I was imagining things, that the glowing verse was just a trick of the fire, but every time I closed my eyes, those words pulsed behind my eyelids like living light. By morning I felt nauseous, hollow, and strangely afraid, as though something had touched me that I wasn't meant to feel. But I pushed it away, because pushing things away was the only skill I had mastered. I went back to my activist group the next day, pretending to be the same Khalid they praised, the fierce one, the bold one, the one who never hesitated. The rallies grew more heated every week. Our leaders taught that Christians were deceivers, that the Bible was corrupted, that mercy was weakness. We shouted slogans until our voices cracked. We practiced arguments designed to humiliate anyone who opposed us. I absorbed their teachings like poison disguised as medicine. Yet beneath the noise, a strange unease gnawed at me, subtle but persistent, like sand rubbing against raw skin. I kept remembering how quietly the verse had stared back at me from the flames, as if asking, "Do you even know what you are doing?" One evening our group gathered in a dusty courtyard behind a mosque, surrounded by stacks of confiscated Christian materials, flyers, tracts, children's storybooks, and Bibles, dozens of them. The Imam in charge, a stern man with a permanent scowl, lectured us about the dangers of Christianity infiltrating Saudi youth. He said Christians used love as a weapon, compassion as manipulation. He said their God was weak, too emotional, too forgiving. When he said the word forgiving, something twisted inside me. He handed me a Bible and ordered me to set it on fire for the newcomers to show them how a true defender of Islam behaves. My fingers tightened around the book. For a moment I couldn't move. The Imam frowned. "What is wrong, Khalid?" "Burn it." So I forced myself to do it. I flipped through the pages roughly, trying not to look too closely, afraid another verse might stop me again. I tossed it into the flames. The crowd cheered, but before the heat swallowed it completely, my eyes caught a glimpse of a sentence. "Love your enemies." My chest tightened. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself it meant nothing. I told myself these words couldn't touch me, but they did. They burrowed under my ribs like seeds searching for soil. That night I couldn't sleep. My body felt heavy, my mind racing. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw fire and verses that wouldn't burn. My breath came out in sharp gasps, my heart pounding without reason. Anxiety swarmed me, thick and suffocating. I paced my room until dawn, whispering Quranic verses under my breath, desperate for peace that never came. Days turned into weeks, and the unease only grew. My friends noticed I was quieter, more distracted. They joked that maybe I caught the Christian spirit, and everyone laughed, everyone except me. I wanted to scream at them, to tell them something was wrong, something was happening inside me, something I couldn't explain, but I stayed silent. Silence was safer than honesty. Then came the dream. At first it felt like I was floating, suspended in a vast, endless calm. The air was cool. the atmosphere still. I found myself standing beside a body of water, clear, gentle, glowing under soft light. I had never seen water like this in my life. Even describing it now feels impossible. And then I saw him, a man in white, standing on the other side of the water. His presence felt like warm rain on dry soil, like sunlight after a lifetime of darkness. I couldn't see his face clearly, yet I knew, deeply, instinctively, that he was looking at me, not with anger, not with judgment, with something I had never seen before, something that felt like love. He raised his hand slightly, and in a voice that wrapped around me like safety itself, he said my name, Khalid. My chest seized, my breath vanished. I tried to speak, but emotion slammed into my throat, choking me. He stepped closer, the water shimmering beneath his feet, and whispered, "My son." I woke up screaming. My clothes were soaked with sweat. My heart hammered so violently I thought it would burst. I stumbled out of bed, repeating, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim," over and over, convinced it had to be a jinn. It had to be, because if it wasn't, that meant something far more terrifying. I spent the entire day in a fog, barely speaking, barely breathing. That night, the dream returned, and the night after, and the night after that. Always the same, the man in white, the water. My name spoken with tenderness I didn't know how to receive. I went to the Imam for help. He listened with narrowed eyes, stroked his beard, and said, "This is a Christian spirit trying to deceive you. Resist it. Resist. How do you resist peace? How do you run from love?" But fear won, as it always had. I tried praying harder, fasting more, reciting longer passages, but the dreams only deepened, becoming clearer, warmer, more real. Until one night, trembling with desperation, I did the unthinkable. I downloaded a Bible app. My finger hovered over the screen, shaking violently. My breathing was shallow. I felt like lightning was crawling down my spine. If anyone found out, I would be destroyed. But something stronger than fear pushed me forward. I tapped download. And in that moment, the ground beneath my old life began to crack open forever. I remember the night everything inside me finally snapped, and I wish I could say it happened in some dramatic explosion, but it was quieter than that, like a rope fraying strand by strand until it simply gave way. I had returned home after leading another youth session at the masjid, where I stood in front of boys barely younger than me, telling them with all the confidence of a man twice my age that the Bible was a corrupted book and that Christians were lost people. I repeated the same lines I had memorized since childhood, the same arguments my teachers praised me for, the same harsh convictions that made my father proud of me. But on this particular night, every word I spoke felt like a stone sinking in my throat. I could barely breathe. I didn't know how to explain it to myself, so I finished the session quickly and went home pretending nothing was wrong. Yet when I entered my room and locked the door behind me, the silence became unbearable. I stared at the shelf where I kept the scorched remains of a Bible I had burned earlier that year in front of a crowd in Riyadh. At that time, people had cheered, and I had believed I was doing something heroic for Islam. Now, all I could think about was the strange, unsettling tug I felt the moment the flames devoured its pages. I had pushed that feeling down for months, but tonight it rose like a wave determined to drown every lie I had ever believed. I sat on the floor and covered my face with both hands, whispering words that felt like betrayal even in the privacy of my mind. God, if you are there, please help me. I didn't even know who I was praying to anymore. Allah? The God Christians talked about? The one I was taught to fear, or the one they claimed loved them? My chest tightened as memories flooded back. My mother's constant warnings, my father's harsh expectations, my uncle's lectures about honor. I replayed all those moments when questioning anything about Islam immediately resulted in punishment or shame. I remembered being 12 years old, hiding a school book that mentioned Christianity just because the picture of the cross made me curious. When my father found it, he made me kneel for hours as he recited hadith after hadith about apostasy. "Doubt is the doorway to hell," he said. "Don't ever open it." But now doubt was no longer a doorway. It was a storm, breaking down every wall I had built. The more I tried to silence it, the louder it became. I walked to the small window in my room and stared at the dark Riyadh sky, wondering why my heart felt heavier every day, even though I had everything a devout Muslim was supposed to have: knowledge, community respect, discipline, purpose. Yet none of it made me feel alive. None of it filled the emptiness inside me. Instead, the more I tried to obey, the more hollow I became. I leaned my head against the window and whispered again, "Why am I like this?" As if answering my question, a memory surfaced, something I hadn't thought of in years. I was 9, visiting my grandmother in Jeddah, and she had once told me a story from the Quran that mentioned Isa. She said the prophets were all important, but there was something special about Isa that even she didn't fully understand. "His voice brings peace," she had said softly. "Even the angels bow to him." At the time, it didn't matter much, but tonight those words returned with an unexpected warmth that wrapped around my heart. This feeling was nothing like the fear-based devotion I had lived with. It was gentle, it was strange, it was almost hopeful. I sat down again, my back against the wall, breathing slowly as if something fragile were forming inside me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the questions. I wasn't afraid of being wrong. I wasn't afraid of the possibility that everything I had built my identity on might crumble. What terrified me more was the thought of continuing life the same way, carrying the weight of expectations, preaching a faith that no longer made sense to my soul, burying the quiet whisper inside me that refused to die. I knew something was changing. I didn't understand it yet, but it was real. It was deep, and it felt like the beginning of something I could not escape, even if I tried. As the night grew colder, I felt an odd pull toward the burned Bible on my shelf. The cover was half melted, the pages blackened, but somehow even ruined. It looked more alive than I felt. I reached for it slowly, almost afraid it might burn me again. My fingers brushed the charred edge and a chill ran through me, not of fear, but recognition. Without knowing why, I whispered, "If you are real, show me." I didn't know I had just stepped into the turning point of my entire life, but something in the air shifted, and deep inside me, a spark finally woke. The dream came without warning, the kind that rips you out of sleep so violently you sit up gasping, unsure if you're waking up or falling deeper into something unseen. I remember my room, dark, silent, familiar, but the air felt impossibly heavy, as if the night itself were holding its breath. I wiped sweat from my forehead and tried to calm my racing heart, but the images from the dream clung to me like they were carved into my skin. In the dream, I was walking through the desert outside Riyadh, the same vast emptiness I grew up seeing on road trips with my father. But this time the sand wasn't golden. It was gray, cold, almost lifeless. The sky was darker than any night I'd ever seen. No moon, no stars, just a crushing emptiness above me that made my chest tighten. I kept walking as if something, or someone, was pulling me forward. Then I saw it, a single light in the distance, small at first, but growing brighter with every step. The closer I came, the more the coldness around me faded. I felt warmth on my face, something soft and unfamiliar. When I finally reached the source of the light, I froze. There, Standing in the middle of the barren desert was a man in white. Not glowing, not floating, not anything dramatic, just standing, still and calm. But his presence hit me with such force that my knees almost gave out. I couldn't see his full face, only the outline, but somehow I knew he was looking straight into me, not at me, into me. All the shame I carried, all the anger, all the fear of disappointing my father, all the pride I had built my life on, none of it could hide from his gaze. I felt exposed in a way I had never felt in the presence of any imam, any teacher, any authority. Whoever he was, he knew me. He raised his hand slowly, and though he didn't speak a single word, something filled my chest. Peace, thick and overwhelming, like warm water pouring into a cracked and empty vessel. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. Then the dream shattered. I woke up to the call to prayer echoing through the neighborhood, a sound I had heard millions of times but never felt so disconnected from as I did in that moment. I sat on the edge of my bed, breathing hard, my hands trembling like I had just escaped an earthquake. My mind tried to convince me it was just a dream, nothing more, but my heart refused to let go of what I had felt. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't random. Something happened. Something real. I ran my fingers through my hair and whispered, "Who was that?" But I already knew the answer long before I allowed the thought to form. Isa. Jesus. The one name I had always avoided, always attacked, always dismissed with rehearsed arguments and inherited hostility. Yet tonight, his presence had felt more real than anything I had ever experienced. I stood up and paced my room, trying to steady my breathing. I thought about the charred Bible on my shelf. I thought about the weird peace I felt while touching it. I thought about the quiet voice in my heart that had been growing louder every day since my inner breakdown. And now, this dream. This man in white. This undeniable pull towards something forbidden. I sat back down and covered my face with my hands. God, what are you doing to me? My phone buzzed suddenly. It was my father, sending a message about attending an important gathering at the masjid that evening. Your presence is expected, he wrote. Expected, required, demanded. The story of my life. I put the phone aside and leaned back against the wall. A thought entered my mind so clearly it felt spoken. If that dream meant nothing, why are you shaking? I looked at my hands. I was shaking uncontrollably, not from fear, at least not entirely, but from something deeper, something awakening within me, something that refused to be buried again. I knew I couldn't tell anyone, not my father, not my mother, not my friends at the masjid. Even hinting at questioning Islam could bring trouble. Admitting I had a dream of Jesus could destroy my life. The danger made my heart beat loud, but it didn't erase the truth. The dream was real. The peace was real. The man was real. And something inside me whispered, "This is only the beginning." I exhaled slowly, long enough for my heartbeat to settle. I didn't know what direction my life was about to take, but I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet, as if God himself had grabbed hold of my story and refused to let me run any more. A soft knock echoed from my door. My mother's voice followed. "Are you awake? Your father is asking." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of everything pressing in around me. Then I whispered to myself, barely audible, "Something is changing. I don't know where this leads, but I can't go back." I didn't realize it then, but that dream was the first time Jesus stepped into my life, and nothing would ever be the same again. The moment my father entered my room, I knew something was wrong. His footsteps were too fast, too heavy, carrying the kind of anger that didn't need words to announce itself. I was sitting on the floor, trying to steady my thoughts after another sleepless night, when he grabbed my phone from the table. I didn't even have time to stand up before he unlocked it with the passcode he had forced me to share years ago. His eyes narrowed at the screen, his jaw tightening until the veins on his neck pulsed like they were ready to burst. I froze. I knew exactly what he had seen. The Bible app notification, the verse of the day, a verse that should not have been there. A verse that could cost me everything. "What is this?" he growled. Not shouted, growled. Quiet, dangerous the way he spoke when he was trying not to lose complete control. My throat dried up instantly. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My father lifted his hand and struck me across the face so hard that I fell sideways, my vision blurring. I tasted blood on my tongue. "Have you become a traitor?" he demanded. "A hypocrite, a kafir." I pushed myself up slowly, my cheek burning like fire. "Baba, it's not what you think." Another slap. This one harder. My ears rang like someone had set off a firework beside my head. "Do not lie to me," he roared. "You downloaded a Bible. You read Christian books. You dare bring their poison into my house, into my family." My brothers rushed in, first Hamid, then Yasser. They stood behind him like obedient soldiers, their eyes filled with disgust. I wasn't their brother in that moment. I was a disgrace, a shame, something to be cleaned. My mother appeared last. She covered her mouth with her hands as tears spilled down her face. "Khalid, what have you done?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I wanted to run to her, to tell her I was lost and confused and searching, but she took a step back as if I were something unholy. That small movement pierced deeper than my father's blows. My father grabbed me by the collar and dragged me into the living room. He threw me onto the floor like garbage and stood over me, his shadow draping my body like a prison. "You are my son," he said through clenched teeth. "My blood. You were raised to fear Allah, to honor the Quran, to obey your imams. How dare you look at the words of the Christians?" His voice cracked with the humiliation of it. Then he turned to my brothers. "Bring the ropes." My stomach dropped. "No, Baba, please." Yasser grabbed my arm before I could move. Hamid held my other wrist. They weren't gentle. They tied my hands tightly, cutting into my skin until I hissed in pain. My father stood in front of me, chest rising and falling with rage. "You will pray," he said. "You will fast. You will do ruqya every day until this filth leaves you." My mother sobbed quietly in the corner. My father turned to her. "Look at him. Look at your son. He has let the Christians touch his heart." Her crying grew louder. My father returned his gaze to me. "We will fix this, Khalid, even if it takes beating the devil out of you." I lowered my head, tears falling freely. Not because of the pain, not even because of the shame, but because, for the first time, I felt the weight of two worlds ripping me apart. My father's world, and the world that had been calling me silently in dreams, in verses, in moments of unexplained peace. They isolated me for 3 days, no phone, no contact with the outside world, only prayers and rituals and lectures from imams who spoke about apostasy with a coldness that chilled my spine. "The Christian spirit is like a disease," one imam said while staring directly at me. "At first it whispers, then it infects, then it destroys." I wanted to scream that I wasn't infected, that I was searching, hungry, curious, lost. But they didn't ask for my thoughts, only my obedience. My brothers mocked me, calling me Khalid the Christian whenever my father wasn't listening. They shoved me, laughed at me, insulted me as if my confusion had stripped me of humanity. My mother avoided my eyes completely, as though looking at me would stain her soul. The loneliness was suffocating, the shame unbearable. On the third night, after hours of forced Quran recitation, I collapsed onto my mattress, exhausted. My wrists were bruised where the ropes had been. My face still pulsed from the beating. My heart felt like it was being crushed by the weight of expectations I could no longer carry. That was the moment I broke. I buried my face in my hands and sobbed, a deep, shaking cry that I hadn't let myself release since childhood. God, I whispered into the darkness, I don't know who you are anymore. I don't know what to believe. I don't know how to be the son they want, or the man you're calling me to be. I'm trapped. I can't breathe. I can't survive this. Then, soft as a breath, warm as sunlight, I heard it. A voice, not from the room, not from outside, from somewhere deep inside me. I am with you. I froze. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I knew that voice. It was the same presence from the dream, the same peace that had washed over me that night my world first cracked open. I lifted my head slowly, tears still dripping onto my hands. Jesus, I whispered. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt full, alive, protective. Something in me shifted, quietly but permanently. I wasn't alone, not anymore. By sunrise, one truth settled into my chest like an anchor. I had to leave. If I stayed, they would crush me. If I stayed, I would never know the one who kept calling me out of the darkness. That night, while my family slept, I stuffed a small bag, opened my window, and climbed out into the unknown. My escape had begun. I didn't look back when I climbed out of the window. I knew that if I turned my head even once, I would hesitate, and hesitation in a house like mine meant death or something close to it. The air outside felt colder than I expected, as if the night itself was warning me of what I was doing. I clutched the small bag to my chest and slipped into the alley behind our house, my heart pounding so loudly I swore the whole neighborhood could hear it. For the first 10 minutes I walked fast. Then I ran. I ran until my legs felt numb, until the fear inside me became a burning energy that pushed me forward. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even know where I was heading. I only knew one thing. I could not stay. Not in that house. Not under my father's roof. Not with the eyes of my brothers slicing through me like knives. I kept hearing that whisper in my soul, I am with you. And somehow it carried me further than my shaking legs could. By dawn, I reached the industrial side of the city where I worked. I hid behind storage crates until the sun began to rise. My mind raced with every possible scenario. My father discovering I was gone, my brothers searching for me, the imam calling religious police. Apostasy wasn't a private family problem in Saudi Arabia. It was a crime. And I had no illusions about what happened to people accused of betraying Islam. When the morning shift started, I slipped inside the building through the back entrance, avoiding the workers who knew my family. I headed straight toward the storage room where I knew I would find Daniel, the Filipino co-worker I had avoided for months because I suspected he was Christian. He was stacking boxes when I entered. His eyes widened the moment he saw me, sweaty, bruised, trembling. Khalid, what happened to you? He asked. His voice was gentle, almost too gentle for the state I was in. I shut the door behind me and leaned against it, breathing heavily. I need help, I whispered. Please. He didn't ask for details. Not yet. He grabbed a chair and helped me sit. When he noticed the bruises on my wrists and face, he swallowed hard, anger and compassion mixing in his expression. Your family? I nodded. Tears gathered in my eyes before I could stop them. I hadn't cried in front of another man since childhood. They found the Bible app, I said. They said they would fix me. Daniel let out a slow breath and knelt beside me. You're safe here, he said. No one will hurt you. I didn't understand how he could speak with such certainty. In my world, safety didn't exist. People survived by hiding or obeying, but he looked at me the way no one had ever looked at me before, with genuine concern. Not control, not suspicion, just compassion. He brought me to a small apartment he shared with 2 other foreign workers. When they saw me, bruised and trembling, they didn't judge me. They didn't ask if helping me would get them arrested. They simply welcomed me with quiet nods and warm eyes. "Sit," one of them said, offering tea. I hesitated. These were Christians, people I had insulted for years, people whose books I had burned, people I believed were cursed. "It's okay," Daniel said softly. "You're safe." I sat. That simple act felt like stepping into another world. After a while, I told them everything: the dream, the verse that wouldn't burn, the voice I heard, the beatings. I expected them to recoil or accuse me of blasphemy, the way my own family had. Instead, they listened with tears in their eyes. When I finished speaking, Daniel said, "Jesus is already calling you, brother." The word brother hit me harder than any slap my father had given me. "But I burned your scriptures," I whispered. "I hated your faith. I hurt your people." Daniel shook his head. "Jesus forgives. That's who he is." The other men nodded. One of them opened a worn-out Bible and read slowly, gently, as if he didn't want to overwhelm me. "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Rest. The word swallowed me whole. I had never known rest, only pressure, fear, obligations, shame. Something inside me broke open again, but this time it wasn't despair, it was longing. We talked for hours. They told me stories about Jesus, stories of mercy, sacrifice, forgiveness, stories that felt like water to a man dying of thirst. As the sky darkened again, they formed a small circle around me. "We can pray if you want," Daniel said. My whole body trembled. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to pray to Jesus. I wasn't sure if he even wanted me, but I nodded anyway. They began praying quietly, hands lifted, tears falling. There was no violence in their worship, no anger, no pride, only love. Their words felt like warm light filling the room. I knelt slowly, unsure, afraid, trembling. "Jesus," I whispered, "if you are real, if you truly are calling me, take me. I have nothing left. I have nowhere to go. I ruined everything. But if you want me, I am yours." The moment I said it, heat flooded my chest, soft, overwhelming, pure. It spread through my body like a river of living fire that didn't burn, but healed. I began to sob, not in fear, not in shame, but in surrender. The room blurred through my tears. Someone placed a hand on my shoulder as I cried into my hands. "You are his," Daniel whispered. "He has you." For the first time in my life, I felt held. I felt seen. I felt wanted. That night I fell asleep on a thin mattress in a tiny apartment, surrounded by men I once despised, feeling a peace I had never known. I dreamt of light, of the man in white, of arms reaching for me. But morning came with footsteps outside the door, heavy, familiar. Someone pounded harshly. "Open!" a voice shouted. My blood turned to ice. The religious police had found me. The pounding on the door shook the entire apartment. Every strike felt like it landed on my chest. Daniel's face went pale. The other men froze. We all knew that sound. No one in Saudi Arabia mistook it for anything else. It was the sound of authority, of control, of fear disguised as law. "Don't move," Daniel whispered, but my legs were already trembling uncontrollably. I felt like a child again, small, helpless, terrified of the darkness creeping into my room at night. The pounding grew louder. "Open the door! Police!" My breath caught in my throat. My heart raced so hard it hurt. The men exchanged glances. One of them quickly shoved the Bible under a pillow. Another kicked my bag deeper under the bed. But there was no hiding me, no escape. We all knew it. Daniel took a shaky breath and opened the door. 4 officers stormed inside, their eyes sharp, searching, hunting. They didn't need long to find me. I was sitting on the mattress, hands gripping the blanket until my knuckles turned white. "You!" The lead officer barked. "Khalid al-Hassan, stand up." My body wouldn't respond. Daniel tried to step forward, but an officer pushed him back with a hard shove. "Do not interfere." 2 officers grabbed me by the arms and yanked me to my feet. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me. Everything inside me screamed to run, but I couldn't. Not now. Not here. The officer stared directly into my eyes. "Your family reported you missing. They said you were being influenced by Christians. Is that true?" His words cut through me. I hated the shame in his voice, the disdain, the disgust. I tried to speak, but fear wrapped around my throat like a rope. I just needed to leave home," I muttered. "I wasn't safe there." The officer scoffed. "Safe? You think you're safe with these people? You think this," he pointed around the room, "is better than the faith of your family?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My silence was enough. They dragged me out of the apartment. Daniel called my name, but an officer slammed the door shut before I could even look back. I was shoved into a vehicle, hands cuffed behind my back. As the door closed, the last thing I saw was Daniel standing there, tears in his eyes, his hand pressed against the window as if he could hold me through the glass. The drive felt endless. The officers whispered about me like I wasn't human. "Another confused one," one said. "The Christians got to him." Another muttered, "We'll fix him." They brought me to an interrogation room, cold, bright, suffocating. A metal table, a single chair, a camera watching from the corner. They pushed me into the seat and chained my hands to the table. The lead officer paced slowly in front of me, studying me like a criminal. "You were a good boy," he said. "A loyal activist, a defender of Islam. We praised you. We trusted you." His words stung more than any slap. "What happened to you, Khalid?" I stared at the table, my breath shallow. "I just started asking questions," I whispered. "I just wanted truth." He slammed his fist onto the table and I flinched instinctively. "Truth? You think Christians have truth?" He leaned close, his voice low and poisonous. "They use weak minds, lonely minds, men who doubt themselves, men like you." He lifted my chin with his hand, forcing me to look at him. "You are not a Christian. Say it." I opened my mouth, but something inside me stopped the words. Not stubbornness, not pride, something gentler, something steady, something like the presence I had felt the night I prayed. "I can't," I murmured. The officer's face twisted with fury. He nodded at the guards. They pulled my chair back violently, lifting me slightly off the ground, and then slammed me against the wall. Pain burst down my spine. They struck my ribs, my stomach, my shoulders, blows that throbbed with each breath. I collapsed onto the floor, coughing, tasting blood. "Say you reject this foolishness," the officer demanded. I clenched my jaw, tears blending with sweat on my face. "I can't," I whispered. Their anger intensified. One guard kicked me hard in the side. Another grabbed my hair and yanked my head back. The room spun, my vision blurred. I thought I would break. I thought I would scream. But instead, something impossible happened. As I lay there shaking, bleeding, barely conscious, I saw him. Not with my physical eyes, with something deeper, a vision, a presence. Jesus stood beside me, not as a distant dream, not as a faint whisper, as a radiant, steady figure whose eyes carried a love so fierce it softened the pain. His hand rested on my shoulder. "I am here," he said. The world around me faded. The blows felt distant. The fear slipped away like water draining from a cracked cup. I felt strength not my own, rise inside me. When the officer demanded again, "Do you renounce Jesus?" I lifted my head slowly. My voice was weak but unwavering. "No." Silence fell, heavy, electric. The officer stared at me as if seeing a ghost. Rage flashed across his face. He stepped forward, then stopped. Another officer entered the room quietly, pulling him aside. They whispered in hushed voices. The new officer kept glancing at me, not with hatred, but with something like pity. After a moment he approached me. "Get up," he said softly. I couldn't. My body refused. So he knelt, unshackled my hands, and helped me stand. "Leave," he whispered. "Do not return to your home. Do not speak to your family. Disappear." My eyes widened. "Why are you helping me?" For a moment his expression cracked. "Because my sister saw the man in white too." Before I could respond, he pushed me toward the exit. "Go, Khalid, quickly." I stumbled out into the night, half dazed, half dead, and entirely changed. I leaned against a wall, the city lights blurring through my tears. For the first time in my life I was free, broken, bleeding, hunted, but free. The streets were quiet as I moved through the city, my bare feet pressing against the rough asphalt. Each step reminded me of the life I had left behind, the home, the family, the expectations that had suffocated me for decades. I wanted to turn back, even for a moment, to see my mother one last time, to hear her voice, to tell her I was not lost, that I hadn't abandoned her, but fear and truth held me firm. When I reached the alley that led to my old neighborhood, I saw him, my father, waiting. His face was pale but stern, his eyes burning with rage and disbelief. The moment our eyes met, every memory I had tried to bury surged to the surface. The lectures, the beatings, the endless nights of fear. And now, standing there, he looked smaller than the tyrant I had feared. But his presence still weighed like a mountain. "Khalid," he said, his voice low and controlled, yet full of menace. "You will repent. You will return to Islam. You will renounce this madness." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The words that had once terrified me now bounced off a part of me that had grown stronger than fear. "Baba," I said, my voice trembling but clear. I can't go back. I have found someone who has changed my life." His eyes narrowed. "Do you mock me? Is this your rebellion?" I shook my head. "I am not mocking you. I am telling the truth. I have seen him. He has called me. He has forgiven me. He loves me. And I cannot unsee that." Rage erupted across his face, and before I could step back, he struck me across the chest. The force knocked me backward, but instead of cowering, I planted my feet firmly, gripping my own chest, as if to brace myself against the blows. "You will die in this madness," he spat. I shook my head again, tears spilling freely down my face. "If I die, I die. But I cannot deny him. I would rather lose my life than lose the one who saved it." He lunged forward, grabbing my shoulders, shaking me violently. I could feel every bone in my body jolt with the impact, the old fear threatening to overtake me, the instinct to obey screaming inside me. But the voice inside my soul, the same one that had whispered peace in the darkest cell, that had called me out of my home, that had lifted me when I was beaten and broken, remained steady. "Do not touch me," I whispered. "You cannot hold me any more. I belong to him." His eyes flared with fury, and for a moment I thought he would strike me again. Maybe kill me. I flinched, bracing for the pain, but instead he stepped back. His chest heaved, his hands trembled slightly. He glared at me one last time. "You are no son of mine," he said coldly. "Do not come back." I stood there, soaked in sweat, blood, and tears, listening to the weight of his words. For a moment my heart ached. Not for me, not even for the fear that had gripped me since childhood, but for the mother who wept in silence, for the family torn apart by my decision, for the life I would never reclaim. And then, slowly, I began to understand something I had only felt in glimpses until now. Freedom is never gentle. Freedom comes at a price. The streets I had walked so many times now felt strange, unfamiliar, and yet intoxicatingly alive. I took a step forward, and the air seemed lighter, the night quieter, as if the city itself was holding its breath, acknowledging my choice, my courage, my surrender. I didn't turn back. I walked away from the house barefoot, feeling the roughness of the road beneath my feet, each step a declaration, a prayer, a release. Tears streaked my face, but they were no longer only sorrowful. They were tears of relief, of triumph, of life reclaimed from the grip of fear and indoctrination. With each step, I felt the chains of my past fall further behind me. I was bruised, battered, hunted, and lost, but also filled with a peace I had never known. I whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for calling me. Thank you for loving me even when I could not love myself. Thank you for giving me courage when I had none." The streets led me to a quiet alley, where I paused and looked back once. The house loomed in the distance, a symbol of the life I had been born into, the life I had left behind. My father's shadow seemed smaller now, less terrifying, less capable of holding me. I felt no anger toward him, only sorrow. Sorrow for a man who loved power more than truth, for a family that couldn't understand, for a culture that equated obedience with devotion. I turned fully toward the darkness ahead, the night stretching infinitely before me. The wind carried a softness I had never noticed before, brushing against my face like a gentle reminder that I was alive. Alive, free, chosen, held. I whispered again, "I belong to you, Lord. I belong to you, and nothing can take me from your hand." My tears mingled with the night air as I walked. With each step I felt lighter, as if the weight of fear, shame, and expectation had been lifted. I was still hunted, still vulnerable, but I was no longer afraid. The night carried me forward into a life I could not have imagined in my darkest dreams, a life not dictated by fear, but by love. And in that love, I knew I was finally home. The morning light felt different on my skin, as if it carried a warmth I had never noticed before. I sat at the edge of the small river, my clothes damp with mist, my hands trembling as I held them over the water. I had not slept the night before, not because of fear, but because of the overwhelming weight of what was about to happen. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being forced into anything. I was choosing this, choosing him, choosing freedom, choosing a new life. The pastor stood beside me, his presence calm and fatherly, so unlike anything I had ever known. He didn't rush me, he didn't push me, he simply waited, his eyes filled with an understanding that both comforted and unsettled me. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. I nodded, though my voice trembled when I spoke. "Yes, I don't want my old life anymore. I want to follow him." We stepped into the water slowly, the current brushing against my legs like a gentle invitation. Every ripple seemed to whisper a promise. Cleansing, renewal, rebirth. I closed my eyes as the pastor placed a hand on my shoulder, his other hand supporting my back. "Khalid," he said softly, Do you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? The question echoed through my soul. I felt every moment that had led me here. The fear, the beatings, the rejection, the nights of crying alone, the voice that called me in the silence, the love that broke through every wall around my heart. My voice cracked, but the words came from the deepest part of me. Yes, I accept him with everything in me. The pastor smiled gently, and before I could take another breath, I felt the world tilt. The water closed over me, cool and heavy, but instead of drowning me, it felt like an embrace, a womb, a grave, a beginning. In that split second beneath the surface, I saw my past flash before me, the boy who obeyed without understanding, the teenager who feared every question, the young man who flinched at every sound, the son who walked barefoot into the unknown. And then it all dissolved. The water rose around me like a veil being torn away, and when the pastor lifted me out, the sunlight blinded me for a moment. I gasped, not from shock, but from a feeling I had never known so intensely, freedom that filled my lungs like air after years of suffocation. The pastor held my arm to steady me. "Welcome home, brother," he whispered. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Tears poured down my face, mixing with the river water dripping from my hair and clothes. For the first time in my entire life, I felt wanted, seen, loved, not for what I could be, not for what I should be, but for who I truly was. The other believers gathered at the edge of the river clapped and cheered softly. Their faces were kind, full of warmth and joy. Not a single expression of judgment or suspicion, only love. Pure, unconditional, steady. A love I had never witnessed in my father's home. They wrapped a blanket around my shoulders as we made our way back toward the church. My body shivered, but not from cold. It was the weight of the moment, the reality that I had crossed a line I could never uncross. I had died to the life I once knew and risen into a new one. Inside the small church, they gave me dry clothes and a seat near the front. The worship began, soft and melodic, and the voices rose like a gentle river of sound that washed over me. I bowed my head, letting the words sink into me. You rescued me. You set me free. I closed my eyes, whispering a quiet prayer. Thank you for choosing me, for saving me, for giving me a home when I had none. As the service ended, people came to greet me one by one, each handshake soft, each smile genuine. They didn't ask for my past. They didn't demand explanations. They simply welcomed me as a brother. A young man my age approached me, his expression both excited and gentle. I heard your testimony, he said. Man, I can't imagine what you've been through, but you're safe now. You have family here. Family. The word struck me deep. I had lost mine the night my father turned his back on me. But here the word felt new. It didn't feel like a cage. It felt like shelter. Over the next few weeks, I spent every day learning, reading scripture, asking questions, sitting with other believers late into the night as they explained things with patience I had never known. My heart healed in small, quiet ways. My fears weakened. My faith grew roots. One evening, the pastor asked if I would share my testimony at the next gathering. My heart hammered with fear, but I nodded. When the day came, I stood before the small congregation, my hands trembling, my throat dry. But the moment I opened my mouth, the words flowed. I told them about my father, my mother's silent tears, the fear that had shaped me, the emptiness inside me that no prayer or ritual had ever filled. And then I told them about the night Jesus whispered to me, about the peace that entered my body like a fire and a comfort I had never felt before. As I spoke, I saw tears in the eyes of the listeners, not pity, not shock, compassion, love. When I finished, they surrounded me, laid hands on me, prayed over me with a tenderness that broke me open again. I felt safe, seen, held. That night, as I walked home under the quiet sky, I realized something beautiful and terrifying. I had stepped into a purpose larger than myself. I no longer belonged to fear. I no longer belonged to the expectations of my father or the chains of my past. I belonged to him, and this was only the beginning. The night was quiet when I recorded my first message. I sat in the corner of the small room the church had given me, my back against the wall, my phone trembling in my hand. I didn't have a script. I didn't have a plan. I only had a story burning inside me, a story I had tried to bury under fear, shame, tradition, and silence. I opened the camera and stared at myself for a long moment. My face still carried the marks of the life I had escaped, the slight bruise fading under my eye, the tension in my jaw, the heaviness in my eyes. But there was something else too, a softness, a light I didn't recognize before. I pressed record. My voice cracked on the first sentence. My name is Khalid, and this is how Jesus saved me. I spoke slowly at first, then faster as the memories poured out of me. I talked about the child who grew up terrified of making a mistake, the teenager who believed love had to be earned through fear, the young man who thought burning Bibles proved devotion, the son who trembled under his father's shadow. And then I spoke about the dream, the man in white, the voice calling me, my son, the brokenness, the escape, the arrest, the moment in the river where I rose into a life I never thought possible. When I finished, my chest felt lighter, as if the weight of 29 years had finally found a place to rest. I uploaded the video, not expecting anything. I wasn't seeking attention. I wasn't chasing recognition. I just wanted my story to reach someone, anyone, sitting in the same darkness I once lived in. Hours passed, days, and then the messages began, one by one, hundreds, thousands, anonymous names, hidden profiles, middle-of-the-night whispers from people who were too afraid to speak in daylight. Brother, I'm Muslim, but I've been seeing the man in white too. I can't ask questions in my home, but your words, they opened something in my heart. I thought I was the only one afraid. Can you tell me how to find Jesus? I read every message with trembling hands. Some of them made me weep, some of them made me pray for hours, and some of them reminded me of myself so painfully that I had to pause just to breathe. I didn't feel worthy of their trust. I didn't feel prepared to guide anyone. I was still learning, still healing, still figuring out how to live this new life. But the pastor told me something that settled deep into my soul. Khalid, Jesus doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. So I kept speaking. Not as a preacher, not as a teacher, just as a man who had met a love stronger than fear. The online ministry grew, the testimonies multiplied. People from places I had never heard of wrote to me, saying their hearts had been touched, their dreams had changed, their fears were loosening, and yet there were moments I missed my family, moments I would lie awake wondering if my mother thought of me, if my brothers still mocked me, if my father ever regretted the night he told me to leave barefoot. I prayed for them every day, not that they would suffer, not that they would be punished. I prayed for the same thing Jesus gave me when I least deserved it, mercy. One night while reading my Bible, I reached a verse that split me open all over again. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147:3. I must have read it a dozen times, letting each word sink into the scars my past had left. I wasn't healed all at once. I wasn't suddenly fearless or whole. But every day I felt him binding something inside me, old wounds, old lies, old fears, one thread at a time. The church became more than a place of worship. It became my home. Fathers who weren't my father, brothers who weren't my blood, sisters who prayed for me like I was their own. A family I never expected, but a family I desperately needed. Months passed, seasons changed, and one evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, I realized something beautiful and profound. I wasn't running anymore, not from my past, not from my memories, not from my name. I wasn't the angry activist who burned Bibles. I wasn't the terrified boy afraid of his father's footsteps. I wasn't the man hiding in the shadows, trembling at every knock on the door. I was new, redeemed, claimed, loved. I stood outside the church, the wind brushing against my face, and I whispered into the fading light, "Thank you for not giving up on me even when I gave up on myself." And then another sentence rose from somewhere deep within me, so deep I knew it wasn't mine. This is only the beginning. So I made a promise, a quiet one, a lifelong one. I would spend every breath, every day, every moment telling the world about the one who found me in the fire, spoke to me in the dream, walked with me in the cell, and met me in the river. I would reach out to the lost, the afraid, the questioning, the broken. I would be a voice for those who had none, a light for those still hiding in the dark. Because if Jesus could rewrite my story, if he could take a man like me, someone who burned his word, cursed his people, and ran from his voice, and turn me into a living testimony of grace, then there is no heart too far gone, no life too shattered, no soul too stained. I looked into the camera again months later, stronger this time, my eyes steady, my voice sure. "I burned Bibles," I said softly, "but Jesus never burned me. He healed me, and he can heal you too." And with that, my new life began, not as the boy who never belonged, but as the man God redeemed for his glory.